As a recognized leader in embedded analytics, Yellowfin has been designed and built to enable you to embed amazing analytical experiences into your software. From a highly integrated dashboard module and self-service reporting, to enabling best practice integration that blurs the lines between analytics and your application and workflows. Modernize your reporting environment with Yellowfin to ensure your customers engage with your data, discover insights faster through automation, and innovate with contextualized analytics.
Thanks for tuning in to the Product-Led Festival. We really hope you're enjoying the summit so far because we've got even more insights heading your way. All sessions are designed to be interactive and give you the chance to engage with our panelists, so come ready to get involved with your questions and comments. For all things PLG, don't forget to check on the PLA memberships at productledalliance.com. Sit back and enjoy the next session.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Product-Led Festival. I'm really pleased to announce our next speaker, Peter Knudsen, who is Senior Product Manager of Electronic Arts. He'll be doing a talk today on gamifying growth. Welcome, Peter.
Hi, Caitlin. Thank you. Hello, everyone. So I am here to talk about gamification, and I've prepared some slides. I can't see or hear you, but I'm assuming you're all here and excited to learn. Should I go ahead and start screen sharing, Caitlin?
Yep.
Okay, great. So this presentation is about gamification and how it can help grow your product. First, a little bit about me. So my name is Peter Knudsen. You can call me Peter K. I've been in the game industry for over 10 years and almost exclusively in product management. So I've been all over the industry in terms of different types of products. So I got my start at Wizards of the Coast, actually as a game designer, designing cards for Magic the Gathering. I worked in the free-to-play Facebook and mobile space at Zynga. I spent some time as a manager of product management at Unity, and I'm currently a product manager focused on product strategy at EA. If you're interested, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. The handle is This is Peter K. And these are some of the games that I've been working on. So I really like one thing that led me down into game design is just that it's a product where your business is making money when your product is fun. And I felt that was noble, and I've made my career about it. And one thing that I've liked to do is to see the connection between how gaming products engage and retain players and how those can be applied to other types of products. Also, just as a note, I recently released a book called Product Sense. This is a resource guide for aspiring PMs, so it makes a good gift if you know somebody who's trying to get into product. You can find, if you like what you see here, then you might find some insights in here valuable. That's at productsensebook.com. So I'd like to start off this presentation with a story, and this dates back to pre-pandemic, where I was a relatively active person. And maybe like many of us, I found a love of takeout and probably beer during the pandemic, and I gained a little bit of weight. One of my friends had told me about the Peloton, so an exercise bike that you can get at home, and that felt like a good compromise because all of the gyms were closed, and I really wanted to get back to being in an active lifestyle. So I ordered one, and as you can see here, there was this big red warning bar at the top of the screen after I had completed my purchase, and it said that bike delivery times were 4 to 9 weeks. And so while were happy to take my money, I had to wait a long time for the bike to actually arrive, which became sort of an issue. And I had gotten a Facebook ad that said the SoulCycle bike was actually, you could bring that one home, and that it was pretty similar to the Peloton bike. And I was a huge SoulCycle fan, so I decided to go ahead and order that one. And so that one arrived, and I was happy. Put it right there in my living room. But one thing that I had forgot was that I actually didn't cancel the Peloton bike. And so now I have 2 bikes. I told them to just put it right next to the other one. And this began a journey for me, or rather a competition between these 2 bikes about which one I was going to keep, because there's really no point in having 2 bikes. So the SoulCycle bike was relatively nice, and it had a lot of good features about it, and I also really liked the instructors. But ultimately, there wasn't really anything that hooked me into it. I could have, if I put the bike down and walked away, I hadn't invested in anything other than maybe just my exercise for that day. But what the Peloton bike had offered me was a sense of progression, achievement, and excitement. There's a lot of different flows in there that kind of help you see your progress while you're using the Peloton bike, connect with other people, and earn some achievements. And as weird as that sound, that was my motivation for keeping the Peloton. And again, there was social features and connecting with friends and competing with them that the Peloton offered that the SoulCycle bike did not. So ultimately, that was what drove me to keep the bike. So that kind of comes down to what the purpose of this talk is: gamification, the practice of applying these features, the gaming features and elements, to non-gaming activities such as the Peloton. So this talk is going to kind of cover three things. It's going to go over the pillars of game design, a couple of these that are the mechanics of creating engaging experiences. It's going to talk about how to tie these into a user's lifecycle model so that you can take your game concepts and apply them to a player lifecycle framework. And then we're going to pepper these in with a bunch of examples so you can see in practice how even the major app developers and publishers are implementing gamification to grow and engage their players, or users rather. So why should you gamify? Why is it a good idea? Well, there's really three kind of buckets. One, from the revenue perspective, if you look at the top grossing games on the app stores for mobile specifically, you'll see that games always dominate the revenue charts. This is because the games using these features they drive a lot of in-app purchases and advertising spend. From a growth perspective, gamification allows developers or product managers really to set the initial price of the service for free. And then using these gamification features allows to slowly ramp up a user and then convert them later on. And then also retention. So in addition to engagement, a product that has high retention using gamified features will ultimately lead to growth. And so retention is really what is driving long-term growth. And that's illustrated here. So if you see, essentially these four buckets are different types of apps bucketed by retention. And they all start with relatively similar early user retention. So in the first week, maybe they're retaining at similar rates. But what drives long-term user growth is what is retaining users over the long term. And gamification and engagement and focus on retention rather than optimizing the early onboarding flows. If you focus on what drives user behavior over the long term, you're going to be able to have a product that's going to last a long time. So I'll jump into the principles of game design. I'm only going through three of them. There's lots of different parts of game design, but I think three easy ways to think about product growth you're already off to a good start. So the key terms I'm going to go over are these three. So aspiration, core loop, and progression. So aspiration, and we're going to go into each one of these in a little more detail, but essentially at a high level, aspiration is when your product is free, what does your user aspire to be that hooks them in from the start? So a lot of the times products will onboard users to understand core actions or just kind of walk them through the product, but really a game is going to demonstrate really hook them in about what by playing this game is the user going to be able to become. They get to role play into something, or they get to be able to build this gigantic castle or something like that. And you want to demonstrate that early on. The second concept is called the core loop, this is a very common industry term for games, but what are the daily set of actions that you want the user to complete? And when they do complete these steps, they get something out of it, and it incentivizes the main actions that you want them to take, and also rewards them for doing so. Lastly, progression. So as they're going through the core loop, are they getting a little bit closer to that aspiration that you set? What are the milestones that you can set up to reward the user for growing, and are you making it clear what the path is to get to that end state? Okay, so 1 second. So I'll go into the aspirational onboarding piece. A good gaming onboarding experience incentivizes the main behaviors, rewards engagement immediately, and introduces the aspiration, just like I said. So on the right, here's an example of the role-playing game Skyrim. You start out the game as somebody with no items, no armor, nothing, and that the initial sequence of the game introduces this gigantic dragon, and then you end up having to, you sort of fight it, you sort of escape, but what really happens is that the user or the player is saying, oh well, I don't have anything right now, and there's this like gigantic dragon that I'm probably gonna have to slay at some point. So if that's my end state, then my goal here is to go acquire a bunch of items and complete quests and be able to eventually slay this dragon. In the gamified space, so here's some examples of aspiration from the non-gaming space. So I have 3 here. On the left is Google local guides, and that's essentially the incentive here is to get users to go rate and review stores, just like they would do at Yelp. But they've set up a system, a gamification system, where that people who engage with the local guide feature are now, they're aspiring to be an ambassador, somebody who knows a lot about, for example, I live in San Francisco. I've decided to use this feature, and it's recognizing, me and others that like, oh yeah, you know a little bit more than the average person. The second one is Citizens. So that's essentially an app that allows users to kind of see crime activity around their neighborhood or other parts of the city. And that by using that, the app is telling you that you can be, the neighborhood watch. Like, who are you protecting in your neighborhood by being able to be aware of what's going on in terms of crime? And then Duolingo is a very good example of a gamification system, and that they aspire you to be, hey, you can be fluent, you can be a polyglot, you can be somebody who's educated enough to know multiple languages, and they make that very clear from the beginning. So the takeaway here is that an onboarding flow, if it's gamified, can do more than just teach. It can inspire users to become something that they aren't already. The core loop. So like I said before, it's a series of actions that is repeated as the primary flow for your players. And when they execute this core loop, when they go through each of these actions, they receive some benefit. There's some outcome that incentivizes them to keep going, and closer to that aspiration that we set. So, and a good example of this is, well, a very classic one is the game Farmville, which I happened to work on it 10 years ago. And the core loop was basically 3 actions. You plot pieces of land, so areas on your farm, you have to plot them. Then you plant crops on that, whatever you want to, I guess, harvest in the next step. So then you go harvest your plants, and that gives you some resources in which you can go sell them to other farmers. And then you get more money to buy more plots, you get more space to plant more stuff, and so on and so forth. And so by doing those 3 core actions, you're getting a bigger and bigger farm. So that's a classic example of a core loop. Another example of a core loop here would come from Clash of Clans. So this one has a little bit more of a complex visualization, but the breakdown is that you harvest resources, you use that to build armies, new buildings, and then you go and you take them into battle, which gives you more resources to build more buildings, and so on and so forth. And so at each of these steps of the loop, the user is progressing a little bit further and further. So thinking about that from a non-gaming perspective, we can go back to Duolingo. Essentially, you're completing the core actions of learning a little bit about the language. It builds you closer to these, you keep going, like progressing in terms of streaks, which is an incentive to continue to learn. And then by continuing to learn and doing more of these quizzes, you get to be able to claim some rewards, which is further demonstrates progression towards the goal. Lastly, another example, going back to Google local guides, is that the loop here is you visit places, you can contribute by saying, oh yeah, this place has fast service or a great wine list. And then by doing that, you're leveling up, which gives you more badges. It unlocks even some other perks. You get to get recognized as a local guide, which incentivizes you to go back to reviewing and describing places. So this is a gamified loop that really is driving the behavior that Google wants, which Google wants accurate and good reviews of the locations that people visit. Okay, so key takeaway number 2. So aim to create a series of actions that are intuitive, that demonstrates a continued, that gets continued use to get them closer to the user's goal. So progression, this is the third core concept. Progression, these are all related: core loop, aspiration, and progression. But the last doubling down on progression is that it's the milestones that keep users engaged because they can see visible movement towards their goal. The rewards boost motivation, and then in addition to continue to retain the users because they're less likely to return now that they're invested. That investment piece is really important here, because as they progress, they earn maybe the achievements, maybe they earn different status in the app. That's something that they own now, that if they were to leave and go to another app, maybe they were saying that they're going from Google local guides to Yelp, they wouldn't be able to take those achievements with them. And so these rewards are not only just a visible checkpoint, but also something that creates an investment in the user. And those drive retention. And then retention, like we said before, is a key driver of growth. So here's an example from a game, Hearthstone, which is a kind of a collectible card game that people open packs of cards or use different digital cards to build decks and play against other players. And the key thing that they want is, additional cards to build better and better decks. And this is a system here where they can show that by playing the game more and more frequently, you get rewards along this path. So it's very clear what the user is going to get if they continue to unlock level 4, level 5, so on and so forth. And so that drives the behavior of continuing to want to play because that next milestone is right in sight and it's something that the user wants. From the non-gaming space, you can see a number of good examples here. Even big game or big app developers are utilizing this. So Uber a couple of years ago released a loyalty program which has tiers and a clear progress bar to the next level, what the rewards are. This is again hitting on the key points here of progression, which are that the user is invested. They might not want to switch to Lyft because they have the platinum status. And that they can see what they're going to get out of it. Transit is an app that I use for public transportation, and it's what they want, the behavior they want to drive is that I'm giving real-time location data to the app so that I can help other people, so that they use real-time location to be able to do very good predictions of when the next bus is going to come. And by turning it on, it's letting me know that I'm making other riders happy, which is, that's a good feeling. And then that there's a competition. I'm 215th place. That means I've ridden the public transportation, that much times. And then the goal maybe being the number one here. And that says that I am awesome. And then even Facebook is using this for their group features, so that if you're engaging with the group, then you earn these badges. And that incentivizes users to continue to add value to the groups that they're in. So the key takeaway here for number 3 is that milestones are help users to see the value of completing that core loop. It's that last step in that user journey, which we'll go into now how that all relates together. Oops. Let's see. Okay. So fitting the game design concepts into a user's journey. So we went over the concepts, and now let's see how they fit in together. So again, the new user discovery is first. It's not only teaching, but it's showing the aspiration. And then, we onboard the user by showing them the core loop. What are the main actions that you want to take in the game or app? Thinking about those holistically. Then the progression. So as they continue these core loop actions that are, aimed at driving engagement and incentivizing the main behaviors you want, how is that player or user being incentivized, and can they see their progress? The player has to be able to see it. And then lastly, once they get past this long-term progression, what is that end game? What can you demonstrate that they've made it to that aspiration, and then what do they do at that point? There's a few different options here. Like mentorship is another big one. Like social features are another one that drives. Once that player gets to that point, what are they doing doing further off of that? And social is a really big element of that one. And so let's break this apart into an example back to Skyrim. So you start off as a person with basically nothing. So you're aspiring to be that dragon slayer. Then you complete the core loop, and the core loop in Skyrim is that you get quests, and then you complete these quests, and you get items or gold and things like that, and then you can continue to do more and more quests. Here in the mid-game progression is that as you complete these quests, you're also getting rewarded with kind of experience and levels and things like that. And so that by continuing to level up, you can actually start to delve off and role play. Maybe you want to go really close and you want to become somebody who knows a lot about magic and spells, and so then you can further specialize into that. And that's another way for your player to get closer to that aspiration of that dragon slayer. And lastly, in the end game, is that you've got this amazing Daedric armor, and then you're destroying dragons and things like that. And once you've completed the game, the main quest, there's an infinite amount of quests that you complete in the game, and then really it's just about demonstrating and completing all of the different quests that you can. And then if the Skyrim isn't social, but in role-playing games that are, once you get to that end game is when that game actually starts, and now you're competing against other players or joining raids with other players, and then you're competing and trading and trying to become just the most badass person that you can. So we'll go through this user journey again, but using a non-gaming example. So we'll use MyFitnessPal. MyFitnessPal is an app that helps people track basically weight loss, the calories that they consume in a day, and that just generally a health app that makes it easy for you to just keep track of the food that you eat. So in the aspiration, the first steps that they do is like, hey, what is your goal? What is your goal weight? What are you currently at now? And then how fast do you want to lose it? And then it shows you right away that, hey, you could reach your goal weight by this day if you follow the plan. So already it's showing you that your goals are achievable and that you can get there by following the path. The core loop, this one, is that you go in, you log your food in the day or throughout the day. It shows you how much you have left, the different kind of proteins you can see and engage with other people. And then by completing your daily logging, it's giving you a little bit of a thumbs up. Hey, good job. And then the progress here is that as you check in, as you continue to use the app, your charts get filled out. It shows you like the progress that you've had, your streaks that you've had, the amount that you've invested and what your payoff is. And it's very inspiring for users to be able to see a visible reward for going through the exercise of logging the food. And then they also do a really good job at the end, kind of throughout the process. And also once you get there, is that you have a way of showing before and after pictures or engaging with other users about, and, demonstrating that, hey, you've succeeded. And then at that point, the elder game or long-term game could be about, encouraging others to follow in your footsteps and be able to achieve what they are setting out to as well. So putting this all together, using the concepts from game design and the user journey kind of lifecycle framework here, you can fill out this Mad Lib, basically, like I said. So I'll go through it. So in this game, and then think about what your core loop is. So it could be plot, plants, or track calories. So in this game, I do the core loop in order to, and then the short-term progression systems that you put in there. So purchase buildings or lose weight or something like that. So in this game, core loop in order to short-term progression that helps me, and then the goals. So medium-term goals, so unlock new areas, look and feel better. And then lastly, when that once you keep doing all this progression systems, it lets me become the aspiration. So while you are supposed to demonstrate that aspirations at the beginning of the product's experience, ultimately that's the goal for the users. And if you are mindful while you're designing your product or your UX about demonstrating what that aspiration is, then the player will understand why they're going through all this, doing the actions, understanding the progression, all that kind of stuff. So this is a framework that you can use and take back to your product teams and to think about, like, are we covering all these spaces? Do we have the right loops in place? Because these all have to exist together. And if one of the things that you see a lot of times when people are trying to gamify their apps is maybe they just think about the progression or goals or achievements or badges, but really that's just one item. in the slice of the loops that you need to build in order to have a truly gamified experience. So lastly, like I was saying, plan the entire experience from novice to expert, and have a coherent gamified experience. Because just like in games, apps and other products have novices and they have experts, and then there's the path that you have to take in order to get that novice to become an expert, and then those experts are the one that retain. So the more that you can help your user incrementally get more and more experienced, the higher your retention, and ultimately the growth of your product is going to remain high compared to maybe an app that doesn't have those experiences. So I think I'm right on time. I left 5 minutes for questions. So thank you for listening. And again, you can find me on LinkedIn. This is Peter K. This is also my email address. This is peterk@gmail.com. And then I'm happy to answer any questions, or if you can reach out and we can talk further via the other channels. But thanks again for listening.
Thanks, Peter. That was a great presentation. We'll just give it a few seconds for people to gather their thoughts and pop some questions in the chat if you've got any. But yeah, good time in there. Oh, Jessica's asked if the slides will be able to be downloaded. They should be available after the presentation, and the presentation to be recorded, so you'll be able to view it again afterwards. We've got a question here for you, Peter, from Raoul, who says, do you have any examples of where gamification wasn't successful and why?
That's a very good question, and something that I would probably want to put in the deck if I had a bit more time. But I'll give broad strokes, because off the top of my head, I'm sure there are good examples, but I'm drawing like a blank right now. But I think that when gamification goes wrong is when you don't think about that holistic experience. A lot of times people will think about just like, oh, if we just add badges, that's great. People will want to get those. But really, like it's not that the user wants badges necessarily, but what is it that those badges or achievements allowing them to do? So it could be that, hey, they could be showing off, because vanity items are important for that experience. So in games, vanity items are very important. They might not necessarily translate into a product that's not gaming, for example, but an achievement like in Uber rewards, where it's actually you're getting some tangible benefit for hitting that milestone, is an example of like a vanity, like silver or gold or whatever, but it's tied to something else. So I think it's really, if you can think about the whole experience from start to finish and why the user would even want to go through these loops, is what makes gamification go well. If it goes poorly, it's because you're just kind of pinpointing one aspect of that experience without considering the other parts of it.
Great, thank you. We've got a question here from Isaac, which I might also combine with, where's the other question gone? With the question from Jan. So Isaac says, can this be applied to service-related businesses, like offering beauty therapy services? And Jan's also asked how it would work in a non-game environment. Like, do you have any numbers for that?
So I see Isaac's question. So service, I'm assuming it's like you're physically going in and there's somebody there providing a service for you. That even at like a really basic level, those loyalty cards that you get sometimes retail businesses is an act of gamification. Like, do you have that incentive to not, you're invested in that, completing those, whatever, if you get to go to the store 10 times, then you get a free one. That's a really basic example of gamification. So I think that yes, these can be applied. I think it's about maybe providing like the incremental rewards and an ultimate goal, which would be to get free stuff, and then those incremental steps, and then there's the path to get there, which is to show up and do it. You can get a lot more experience, like advanced with that. Again, going to Uber loyalty program thing, that's the same. That's taking that concept, but applying a lot more sophistication to it. And so it can be, I imagine it can definitely be applied to service-based businesses pretty easily.
Great, thank you. I've got a question from Shane who says, do you know any of the productivity tools employing gamification for folks who are too busy to pay attention to badges?
Yeah, this is a good question. I think when I see some of these productivity tools, it's actually a very interesting like area to focus on in gamification, because a lot of these productivity tools are very commodities. Like they're essentially easy to switch. Like if you're trying them out, there isn't necessarily like too many major differences between the next one. And so you see a lot of gamification happening in this space too, where it's like, hey, you come in and then it will tell you like, okay, like to complete like the tutorial process, you need to get to 100%, and you need to do you need to try out X feature or Y feature and Z feature, and then invite so many other people. And then at that point, the like, you're getting a little bit closer to being like into the full experience. So I think like this is one where it actually is really important to focus on, especially like when you want to stand out against your competitors. I think having a way to hook people in early is what drives growth for those types of products.
Nice, thanks. And we've got a question here from Dirk who says, thanks a lot for the inspiring talk. What are your tips for B2B applications? How can I pick up a buyer and user persona alike?
Yeah, interesting one. I think even so with B2B, I get, one of the key drivers here probably being customer success. So whether or not that, you sell from an enterprise perspective, the end users are the ones that are going to inform the buyer that whether or not this product is good or bad. And eventually when you evaluate whether or not you want to renew your contract, then the people who are using it are likely to be the ones who will influence it. Not all the time, but some of the time. And I think having the gamification, your ultimate goal here is to have these people be experts in the product and be able to achieve their business results. So I think then maybe focusing on that aspiration bit, which is like, what is this service providing your customer, and what do they want to do? Maybe their workflow is like they just want to get in, use the service, and get done as fast as possible. So maybe your key success metric there isn't necessarily like number of times using the product, but rather maybe time to completion, task completion, things like that. And understanding your user personas there and what their goals are, and then building a system that allows them to achieve their goals is probably the way I would think about it from a B2B perspective.
Great, thanks. I think we've got time to squeeze in this one last question from Bob, who says, what's the best way to add gamification in your product when you start from zero as an MVP to see what works and doesn't?
Okay, let's see. So we're starting from zero. So essentially, I'm assuming that means that you have an idea and you want it to be gamified, but you're not adding it to existing product. You're able to concept from the start. I think that's actually one of the best times to be able to. You want to think about gamification early, if possible, and apply it into your initial UX as early as possible. And the thing is like you don't necessarily need to build out all these progression systems and all this really complicated stuff. But as an MVP state, the most important thing to think about is that core loop. Like, what are these actions that they're taking when they're in the product, and what is an incremental output that they're getting that just kind of moves them a little bit further to that expert status. You can add achievements later, but that core loop you can't change. So that's one of the things we've seen a lot in the game industry, where you have a development team focusing on a game and building out all these crazy cool secondary features, but like that core loop is what keeps people around, what makes the game fun, and then everything else is additive to it first. So my recommendation is to use that core loop framework and think about your product there when you're early on in the design phase.
Great, thanks. I said I think we could squeeze in this one question from Kelly, who says, awesome presentation. Do you have any good examples offhand of sites that have done a good job incentivizing users to engage with each other and help each other learn something or accomplish a goal together? We want them to participate in discussion boards, submit content, etc.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think I would recommend looking and deconstructing the Facebook groups for this one, because I think that they started off as just the groups feature, and Facebook has invested a lot in making sure to try to create engaging content on groups, because that's just one of the products they're really focused on. And they've added a lot of new things like the badges or elements to their group where you can become like I don't remember the exact words they call it, but like a topic expert. And somehow if your posts just get deemed to be very insightful, then those adds a badge to your profile, and then you can become, more engaged to try to like keep that status, or other people can see it and aspire to be one of those, experts too. So and they're adding a lot to this from the gamified perspective. So I think if you're looking for that specific type of use case, you probably couldn't do any better than looking at Facebook groups for now.
Great. Thanks, Peter. Thanks for a great talk. That brings us to the end of the session. Thanks to everyone for tuning in and for your great questions in the chat.
Thank you. See you later, everyone.
Thank you. Stay tuned for our final 2 sessions of the day. Thanks, everyone.